Now I wanted to put it in Do Not Disturb there. Welcome everyone to our CHAOSScon talk, GrimoireLab in Action, a case study in open source health analytics. The agenda for today is to go into what is GrimoireLab. We will describe our case, and specifically Cardano and Intersect, give you a background on that. We'll share baseline metrics that we've looked at before getting into the more detailed analysis. For a specific piece, we are looking at the paid open source model, which is a really cool strategy that I'm excited to share. And I'm excited Tex to be here to share that. And the tactics, and we'll go into the metrics and how they're used in the different tactics. Finally, we have a really cool case of using GrimoireLab with AI for monthly reporting, and we'll close out with some takeaways. Well, I already started to say we have Tex here. Tex, well, who are you? Why are you here?
Well, thanks, Georg. Thanks so much. So yes, my name is Tex. I'm Tex McCutcheon. I am the open source program manager here at Intersect MBO. As the open source program manager, I have the unique ability to look over various programs like our developer advocate program. We also have some upcoming working groups like the tooling working group. We'll have the code forest model that we'll talk about a little bit later. Just a number of various programs, including some accreditation and rewards and recognition that are happening open source based, right, or highlighting open source sustainability and development in the Cardano ecosystem. And of course, we're doing that from Intersect as the member-based organization facilitating Cardano's development. So I'm here because I've got a strong background in analytics. That's actually where I started when I first got into Intersect, get into using the Bitergia platform and figuring out more about GrimoireLab. And I'm really excited to just put it on display.
I can only second that. Tex has been doing amazing work, and I'm super excited to share this with you today in our presentation. About myself, I'm an open source strategist. I've been in open source for a really long time now. I co-founded the CHAOSS project to bring more standard ways of looking at the health and sustainability of open source projects, because I'm on a mission to improve the health and sustainability of open source. And so I'm a community builder. I'm at Bitergia. I'm also doing marketing and sales there. So I've been around doing lots of different things, and I'm super excited that we will look more closely at GrimoireLab. GrimoireLab is a founding project of the CHAOSS community with already more than 20 years history. GrimoireLab was started by a team at the Universidad Juan Carlos in Madrid, Spain. And it has gone through several evolutions, which if you follow this link here on the slides, you can learn more about some of the fundamental decisions that have gone into creating GrimoireLab. GrimoireLab essentially is a metrics tool. And let's go and look at the history. So I already mentioned the LibreSoft team in Spain started developing tools to analyze how open source is being developed, because volunteers on the internet producing software that is used everywhere today, how does that even happen? There were no tools available at the time, and the tools they built, they open sourced. A couple of years later, Bitergia was started by members of this research team to offer commercial services built on the Grimoire metrics, which then later were rewritten because the different varied use cases, you see a lot of the logos here at the bottom that have or are using GrimoireLab over the years. All the different use cases have different requirements. And so in 2017, that community that had started to form around GrimoireLab and community metrics for open source joined forces with many others who are interested in this space, and we started CHAOSS to more broadly define what are metrics and create a bigger community. And only last year we released version 1.0. Only last year we were really comfortable that we'd reached a feature level where we're like, yes, okay, let's start working on version 2, which is out of scope for today. So, but I wanted to show you a couple use cases where GrimoireLab is currently in use, and really the foundation for many different cases where GrimoireLab focuses on producing high-quality data about open source projects and communities. The first one is Bitergia. Bitergia offers its own Bitergia Analytics platform and services around that, which is at the core GrimoireLab with that extra level of service, so you don't have to deploy it, run it, maintain it, update it, and all of that. The document foundation uses the GrimoireLab for its LibreOffice community, and just as one example, their use case was to also give members that are active in the community voting, like decide who has voting rights. And one of the types of contributions that they really cared about was translation, because LibreOffice is available in so many languages. And so they contributed the Webplate plugin for GrimoireLab. Another case is Mystic, which is a project at the Rochester Institute of Technology, taking a look at academic contributions and academic open source projects, and also pulling in other open research activities. The Linux Foundation built the LFX Insights platform, starting from modifying GrimoireLab. Today, they have a far different user interface and extended data for the Linux Foundation project. And then the OSS Compass, which added support for Git-D and innovated metrics models, which, if you're familiar with the CHAOSS project, is a collection of metrics that you look at together, and they innovated that, and it's all built on GrimoireLab. So I'm super happy with all the things that GrimoireLab is powering today, and I want to give you another example for where the data has been used over the years. Just a few examples. The Mozilla Rebel Alliance report is probably my favorite example. You see these beautiful jellyfish. Those are all contributors in the Firefox and Thunderbird communities and all the plugins and all that, and really analyzing the network of contributors. One of the key insights that, thanks to the GrimoireLab data that became visible, is the importance of events. So if you read the report, there's a section that talks about the contributors that went to events became much more involved in different parts of the project. Beautiful report, highly recommend. Two other reports that will show a little bit here in a bit. One is the state of Hedera and the open source crypto ecosystems that we created for the Hedera community, but really looking more broadly at the crypto ecosystem, and Cardano is in there as well. And then, of course, we have the monthly reports here. This is the third example, which we will show you exactly how they are created later today. So if you happen to be a user of GrimoireLab, I hope that you will find this link at the bottom of the slide. Go there and add yourself to this list. We would love to know who you are and what you're doing with GrimoireLab, so that maybe we can highlight your use case as well in future presentations. Well, at this point, I would like to turn it over to Tex, who really is the expert on this next segment about the case that we are going to be discussing.
Well, definitely. Thanks, Georg. And so what we're looking at today here, we mentioned at the beginning, is we're talking about Cardano. So Cardano is a academic peer-reviewed blockchain. It was actually launched back in September of 2017. We have IOHK, that's Input Output HK. They have basically been the primary developer for a lot that you see on the blockchain currently. That includes everything of the Cardano node, all of the resources that help people interact with the node, as well as Plutus, which is the smart contract language for Cardano. As far as where Intersect comes in, as it states here, we are becoming the steward of open source projects, and so Cardano we're looking at as an open source project, an open source blockchain. So the things that we are trying to do is ensure that from even the base levels of documentation, developer experience, that it is effectively open source. So not just open source in name. The goal here, of course, that we are able to diversify and strengthen the technical foundation of Cardano. We do want to make sure that just as a blockchain would be as far as being immutable, that the, what do you call the the way that it's built, the way that it's developed is falling in line. And so these metrics that we're going to talk about a little bit later, they actually offer guardrails for the success. And it's something that we're going to introduce what's called the paid open source model. It's a matter of taking the metrics that we're able to see and then actually influencing how we can make change and how we can make the blockchain itself, the development thereof, sustainable. So I did go in a little bit here on the history. So again, a peer-reviewed blockchain is launched by Charles Hoskinson, who's also been involved with Bitcoin and Ethereum. This is a proof of stake consensus, so that's more secure than the proof of work that is the standard for a lot of blockchains. The token, it is a top 10 blockchain, top 10 crypto token. And so that is ADA, if you'd recognize that. The current price is roughly around 71 cents. It's been hovering quite consistent the last couple of months. And we're proud to show via AdaStat that we have over 3 billion wallets, over 3 billion users, if you will, on the blockchain. So there's over 110 million transactions to date. So in what's about 8 years, that's quite a bit of transacting that's actually happening on the blockchain. And we've actually recently entered our era of governance here. And there's nearly now almost 1,000 delegated representatives, or DREPs as we like to call them. And these DREPs are the primary decision makers for Cardano. So we look to those DREPs to tell us what are the next steps, what are the actions that we're going to take moving forward. So we'll take a look at some baseline metrics here to better understand the Cardano ecosystem. Where do we sit? What is the current state of Cardano? And also, who are the organizations behind Cardano? Uniquely, we're going to get a chance to take a closer look at the report. And you helped us draft this here, a footprint analysis report that we did. So why don't you tell us maybe a little bit more about what we're seeing?
Yeah, happy to chat about the research that we did before going into more detail on the Cardano community. We always like to understand also the ecosystem that a project is in. And so this diagram, this research came from the crypto ecosystem report that I'd mentioned earlier. And we see Cardano here on the left with about 707 contributors, which has some connections into the ecosystem, but a lot of it is centered around the Ethereum project, and there are some in the middle that are very tightly connected. And so Cardano, while we just heard from Tex, is very big as a cryptocurrency and blockchain. When it comes to the way it's developed right now, it's a little bit on the outside. And so let's go dig into the community a little bit deeper and see who is actually present and active in the community. So this diagram is looking at the different parts of the Cardano core and related repositories and the companies that are involved in that. And we see that IOHK, which Tex already mentioned, because they were a founding entity, have a lot of activity and are sitting at the center. But there are others becoming more and more involved, which we'll see really on the next slide, which shows 3 tiers of organizations that are involved. The top one is the first group are the ones that have 80% of total contributions to the code base. The second group are the remaining 20% of code contributions. And then the third group are organizations that don't show up in the Git log itself, but they're active in issues and commenting and reviewing and doing other things in the community. So it's really interesting to see who all shows up here. And just as a takeaway for right now is that there are a lot of different organizations involved. And on the next slide, there is an analysis we did for each one of the top 10 organizations. And what we are seeing is that the IOHK, which is the founding entity for Cardano, is reducing its influence, its activity in the overall community, but a lot of other organizations are increasing their engagement, especially in the 12 months leading up to us creating this report. And if we look at the next slide, I'll just zoom in on Intersect because Tex is from Intersect. You can see here what kind of things we are looking for, the commits, the PRs, the reviewers, the many different people who are engaged from an organization, and we can see how they have been contributing over time. So because Intersect is a very new organization, the history doesn't reach back all the way to what we were looking at, but it starts showing up and becoming active. So we've done this analysis on all the different organizations, and when we look at the next slide, we have a day-to-day dashboard that tracks the information. And Tex, you can probably speak more to this. My understanding is your goal is to grow that community, grow all these new organizations that are joining the development.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, we're looking to enhance the developer experience, enhance the approachability of the blockchain and developing on the blockchain. And so there will still be some core contribution or quite a bit of core contribution that does come from IO. But as we're able to increase the activity on the blockchain, the idea is that those sections of the pie chart here get quite a bit smaller as the core management kind of, I don't want to say dies, but falls into the background, right? So that we're seeing that there's more utility actually being done, and in that case, again, development of tools and projects and other organizations that actually utilize the Cardano blockchain, and not so much just focusing on the core commits, the core development.
Yeah, and from all this understanding, I know we're going to talk about strategy next. What is it that you are doing to really grow this out?
Yeah, so there's a number of different things that we're doing. We're going to talk about this here in a minute, where we have our open source office. Right now, that is just 2 of us, but we push that as much as we can. We also actually have an open source committee. So it's built out of open source experts and even some other technical experts that are a little bit more familiar with some of the day-to-day of the blockchain or the history of development of the blockchain. At the end of the day here, that's going to bundle into the strategy, where we want the development of and on Cardano to be sustainable. But we also want that to be transparent. I really have pulled that terminology out of open source in general, is not just having not just having it as a project where you can openly develop, but also being transparent about what those changes are, how they happen, and what led to those changes happening as well. So we got the paid open source model listed here. We're going to dive a little bit deeper. Just a quick little background on where this comes from. If anyone's familiar with the log4j issue there, it's basically where we end up in a situation where maintainership of something that is that core code that may have minor breaks, minor fixes that are just needed over time. We're left with maintainers that aren't compensated as we move into the infinity. And so what we want to do is make sure that at any point, whether it's core or whether it's new development, that there's always some sustainable funding and a secular, or what do you call it, cyclical model here for that. And that's what we're going to see. So we'll dive in and just talk about what open source does to an ecosystem. What does open source do for your project? That open source is going to bring in that innovation, that transparency, and that trust. So not only is it more approachable for developers to come and want to participate and contribute, But again, as I mentioned here, the actions of what needs to be developed, how do we come to that, and how do we decide what needs to be developed and fixed right away, that's out there. And that's just adding to the trust in the actual code base. We transition that into products. So when people come to actually want to use Cardano and they're going to put their project on the blockchain or backed by the blockchain, we want to make sure that they're able to, the organizations that create those products are able to carry that trust and push that out for additional user and community acceptance, leading to commercial adoption. And we'll talk a little bit about this as well, global adoption. So we'll take this a step further, which probably one of the most important things relative to the Log4j is how do you get money into this here? And so the Cardano blockchain has a treasury, and the idea is that we're able to pull treasury funds to fund these back-end pieces of open source development. That's not only for just the core development that is the node or that is the Pluto smart contracts, but also newer projects that become part of the code, become part of the core for newer and newer products and organizations to continue building. As we increase that commercial adoption and global adoption here, we should see increased transaction fees, so more transactions occurring, and that's going to put more money back into the treasury to just fund a continuous cycle here. So what we're seeing, again, the sustainable funding is going to come from the treasury, is the hope. We're empowering the community with the open source development and the trust and transparency. And again, we are targeting that global adoption, as I've brought in a few times here. So what we'll take a look at next is the actual paid open source model. And we've started with a really redacted view because we want to make sure that we get a good understanding of this here. So you may recognize some of these boxes or titles from what we've seen before, but we'll start on the left where we have Intersect. And at Intersect, we have the open source office and the open source committee. There's a follow through here in just a moment. What that'll lead to is the actual product and pushing over to the commercial adoption and the treasury. Now, just a quick zoom in on the legend here. We see some solid lines on the left, some dotted lines on the right. Essentially what we're seeing here is on the left, the solid lines is what we have control of, what we can actually influence. And now on the right is what's going to be out there in the ecosystem and what we're hoping to have an impact on. But we don't have a direct influence to what happens in those areas, in those circles, if you will. So now we officially bring in the open source office and the open source committee, and anyone who's paying close attention might recognize the software development lifecycle. So the open source office, we directly support the open source committee, and our goal is to facilitate the developer and community involvement in Cardano's development and improve and establish best open source practices. So we manage various partnerships to include Bitergia analytics, utilizing the GrimoireLab piece here. We're able to report on specific metrics that are designed to help the understanding of the general population, as well as the developers, to be able to see and track their own development and where they have an impact. The open source committee that started back in August of 2023, predating Intersect just a little bit. So Intersect was founded in January of 2024. That's officially when we started. But of course, there were some ideas and conceptions back to 2022 as we had seen before. So August 23, that's when the open source committee first got a chance to meet and come together. And by about a year later, August, September of 2024, we'd actually released new governance standards that were required. So any and every repo that is considered part of the core code base would be required to have certain levels of documentation, as well as certain aspects to communicate and participate with the community itself. So the open source committee now, we do hold a responsibility to continue to develop these governance metrics, or I say metrics, to develop the governance standards is what we're looking to do. And the more that we can increase those, the better that we can increase the developer experience. And again, the more developers that want to come and build on Cardano, the more products and organizations that we can have, the more impact we can have on driving commercial adoption. In here specifically under the open source office, this is going to be just outside the box. We do have, again, our strategic partnership, as we mentioned, but we're also offering project support services. We can dive into this a little bit later, but in the basics, what we're looking is how can we support projects by teaching them about open source strategy and sustainability? How can we provide them marketing support as need be? productization, design, some of the things that we're seeing here in the software development lifecycle. How do we make that more just plainly understandable for them? And relate their projects to not only the Cardano blockchain, but how that's also going to appear to the general public. The code forest model here, it's pictured in the first two sections of the development lifecycle here, but the idea is that the code forest model as part of the paid open source was going to help us with small code fixes, new features, small things that the blockchain needs to open up to more projects, more products, more organizations here. The maintainer retainer program is exactly what you might think it sounds like. So the goal is that we want to make sure that we're able to retain those that have the knowledge and experience with the core Cardano blockchain so that we're not experiencing any points of failure. And again, we do expect the core code base to grow just a little bit based on new projects and organizations coming into the ecosystem. And so we want to make sure that those core projects that come in as new also have that same ability to have a retention for their maintainers. So we'll add a little bit more here. One of the important things to take a look at is going to be the accelerator program. So the accelerator program is targeting projects that have already received funding by one way or another. For anyone who's familiar with the Cardano blockchain, the previous funding source through Cardano Development Holdings and through the initial start since it was launched was Catalyst. And Catalyst was developed under IOHK, just one of the different funding models that was out there. Any projects that have previously received funding and may not have been as successful, we want to make sure that we can touch base with them, see how they are still affiliated with the blockchain, and how can we actually get them to that commercial adoption phase. So these are products that actually work. These are products that are out there, but just have missed the mark in gaining that popularity that they need. The other piece here, and I know it's flip-flopping colors a little bit, but we do have the tooling working group. So this is a new working group that's starting with the paid open source model. And the design here is to create and develop any of the tooling that is necessary for, again, these new products to come to light. And so the goal is here is we want to continue to enhance and create opportunities for success. And that's going to be the primary goal of a lot of the work that we're doing from the open source office. And the reason why we talk so closely, open source office, open source committee, the open source committee gets a chance to look over everything that the open source office puts out. And more effectively, we tend to work as one group as opposed to two, since everything that open source office does, again, typically has that OSC open source committee endorsement. A few other things that we did see pop up here. We have project incubation and the contribution ladder. Just to focus on these two specifically here, project incubation is where can we take new projects that want to become products or want to become organizations operating on Cardano and make sure that they are developing their own code base in a way that is similar to the core. We want to make sure that those projects aren't failing or getting into a state of decline before they have an opportunity to properly mature. As far as the contribution ladder, this is where we're focusing specifically on the developer experience. And I'll bring in what we have here on the left, the developer advocates as well. So we do have developer advocates. We're just entering our second cohort now. We're actually going to be doing some interviews here in the next couple of weeks. These developer advocates are those that are experienced with development wide scale. The hope and the goal, of course, is that they have that experience developing on Cardano itself. And they're able to help us move developers through the contribution ladder. So from somebody who just started developing and playing around on GitHub, looking at different projects, open source or closed source that they want to contribute to, we want to share with them more on the open source side of things and be able to help them move from just a new contributor to a regular committer, right? So we just call that a committer. And then we move that into the trusted committer phase. Once you become a trusted committer, you'd have the opportunity to transition potentially to the maintainer piece. And so as people will ebb and flow, the idea is that we can take somebody from a new contributor and over a period of time, which could be as quick as 6 months or as long as, 3 or more years, move them into that maintainer piece. And so we always have a fresh maintainer base. And it's not always the same people getting the compensation. So those are also attacking a few core issues or dependencies from, again, the log4j issue. Going back here. So just a few other pieces. Again, these are a little bit out of scope from what we see. But commercial adoption would lead to additional market research, so we know more of what needs to be developed and what needs to come to market. Ecosystem mapping, which is going to help with the open source libraries piece there. And then revenue models. Hopefully we don't have to always rely upon the treasury to get that funding for open source. And so we'll always be looking for those outside revenue models that will want to help and drive support of this paid open source model. All right. So now that we take a look at the paid open source model, I'm sure there may be a number of questions, and I'm more than happy to discuss if we might have time. But let's dive into some of the specific tactics that we're going to see, how we combine governance and metrics, and we'll look at a number of different programs again. Well, we have the option to anyway. Project support services, the code forest model, maintainer retainer, the project incubation, contribution ladder, and even project lifecycle maturity, which is an evolution of that project incubation. First, let's go ahead and take a look at key metrics. And so there are a number of metrics that we look at just off the bat. These might seem pretty simple, but we do need to understand what is the number of commits, what is the number of issues, what is the number of pull requests, and this can be pared down to just the project level, or we can even go down deeper into the repository level. And so that's that next set of views that we're looking at. We can look at the project, the meta project. We can look down at repository specific. There's a number of various dashboards that you can not only find, but you can also create, again, using, in this case for us, Bitergia Analytics, but the GrimoireLab tooling is the most important piece behind this. We also get a chance to analyze this in timelines from hours to years. So you can see many different stages and phases of development. Did it stagnate? Did it grow? Did it decline? And then what that tells you is you can go back to the community and try to get some better understanding of what may have caused or led to that. We also like to take a look at commits by time zone. This tells us where in the world are our core developers actually making changes to these projects. With the affiliations tool, what we're able to do, there's actually a unique tool called Sorting Hat. I won't get too far into Bitergia, but we're actually able to label the contributors and give them affiliations so we understand who exactly is making those changes. And we'll see that a little bit more as we get into the monthly reporting that we do. So as it's kind of the story's been told, but these metrics really help us highlight who our developers are, where is it that they're affiliated, what is their commitment level to development. And so for any open source program office or equivalent, this helps you to infer the healthiness or unhealthiness of your ecosystem and also gives you some quick hotspots on where to go and fix it. All right, Georg, help me out on this one here. We'll go ahead and take a look at all of these since we are in the recording.
So yeah, we have seen now the baseline that we have created for understanding the Cardano ecosystem before and until Intersect started. Now that we have the paid open source model as a strategic effort to grow with the goal to really grow that community, we can look at the individual tactics and how information from GrimoireLab, the key metrics that Tex just talked about, how they are used in context for making decisions and supporting those different tactics. So let's dive in and look at each one of them in turn.
All right, so we can start with the contribution ladder. Now, I know this may have appeared at the bottom, but the contribution ladder is really where all things are going to start or kick off because we need developers, of course, to develop and maintain the code base. So we're able to cultivate new contributors through membership, structured milestones, and community engagement. And although we haven't mentioned it a whole bunch, community engagement's a big piece of what we aim to have with the open source office, with the open source committee. We really focused on the transparency piece so that we can bring people into the fold. So the GrimoireLabs tool helps us follow a contributor's journey. We can see when they first started making a commit, and it's not even their first commit per se, as much as it is their first activity contributing via comments on an issue or putting up an issue themselves. From that, we can track at each stage. We can break it down just by each one and say, hey, how much have they been active in the comments? Did they move on and start making commits? And how does that translate into them now making pull requests and evolving at each stage? And so the more that they start making commits, they can move from that new developer to the committer stage. from the committer stage as they're making more commits and participating more in the issue conversations. Then we get them into that trusted committer standpoint. Once we're seeing them making regular pull requests, and again, still maintaining that piece with the community in terms of understanding and communicating about the issues, we can then push them to that maintainer piece. But the best part about this is that, again, GrimoireLab helps us track each and every step of that. So as opposed to us just saying, hey, we know that this person is a regular contributor and they're moving up in the levels, we can actually go and put some fact-based, some actual data behind that to prove the point here.
How about we go to the dashboard real quick and take a look?
That is a great idea. Let's do that.
So as Tex is pulling this up, we are going to see the dashboard. At the top, we have the menu already forming. There's a time picker. So we're looking at the last 5 years right now. And then there's a filter underneath that. And you see author name, Terence McCutcheon is already selected. So the whole dashboard is filtered to only look at this one contributor. So if we scroll down, we can see over time how much they have contributed in total numbers. And then also in the bar charts, how much that contribution is spread out over the last 5 years, since that's the time frame we're looking at. So this really gives us, as we are reviewing a contributor, whether they are moving up in the contribution ladder, what has their engagement been in the project? And then Tex, could you go back to the menu at the top? And I want to see how you've done with regards to being a core, regular, casual contributor. So I think under community, if you look at the, overall. So we still have this filtered to text, and we can see that over the quarters that we're looking at here, Tex has been a core contributor in the Cardano ecosystem. So congratulations, Tex.
Thank you. Thank you. No, yeah, it's a big thing to see. I would add just an important piece to this. The GrimoireLab tool adds a lot of functionality, and when we talk about the Cardano ecosystem, we are looking at the repositories that are core Cardano. We're looking at the repositories that are backed for transparency. They're backing up Intersect in our knowledge base. And then we're also looking at the open source office repository. So as much as I'm doing some other things and standing before you here, here virtually, but of course, for others, I'll be standing in front of them physically. I do a lot of activities, but I do still find some time to actually commit to the core repositories here. The point was going to be, you want to make sure when you're actually looking at a contributor base or looking to see how someone's contributing, that you do have all of the right or the relevant repositories actually loaded into your dashboard. And so without looking at those, this isn't going to go and just openly search any and all commits for a contributor across all of GitHub. You have to have it focused within your different projects that you have selected. But from here, we'll move it on. And I would say from open source office, we are always open to your questions. If you'd like a deeper dive on the dashboard at any time, just come and let us know.
Perfect. Yeah. I think that's a great example. Let's go on to project support service. How do you use the metrics from GrimoireLab for this one?
Absolutely. So again, project support services, it's a catalog of services that we offer from the open source office ourselves. So although that's just 2 of us, we look to support the community in any and every way possible. The first one that we'll take a look at, 2 of the 8 tenants here, is marketing and community building. I do know there are only 6 shown here. It's the primary features we can look at. But for marketing and community building, we can use that community structure tab like we just looked at. We can see how many core, casual, and regular committers that we have. And so the piece there is that you can actually determine, hey, how active is your project? If it's not active, maybe you're needing more marketing. Also, it may just be building the community around yourself. So we need to go out and find who all is interested in that project, we're interested for actually using it or interested in just developing it. The next one we can take a look at is open source strategy and sustainability. So we can look at the number of commits, the number of pull requests, and also an organizational diversity dashboard. And again, we're getting down deeper into, hey, how sustainable is this project based on how often it's getting commits? If you have month over month a varying number of commits, then maybe the development activity is not as consistent. And the same goes for pull requests there. On the diversity dashboard, you can see how many different contributors or how many different affiliations are actually contributing to your project. And so you're not necessarily using the right strategy or acting as sustainably as you can if you don't have a lot of affiliations as you would expect. The same thing goes with governance. Maybe your repository or your project is just not approachable based on your documentation. So you're able to make those inferences from the data provided. The last one shown here has to do with product management and training. And this one here just talk about the various dashboards and visualizations and your ability to create basically an innumerable amount of dashboards and visualizations. So again, we primarily use the Bitergia analytics tool, but it is all based on the data that's pulling from GrimoireLab, and we'll take a quick look at that here now.
Yeah, yeah, let's go to the dashboard. I don't think we have to do this for all of them. This is, again, because we're recording now for all of them. At the actual CHAOSScon, we'll only focus on some. The interesting thing for this one to look at, I think, is how you can filter down. And there at the top, you see CM Group Governance Tooling. So this is a way to create groupings of repositories and projects to focus on while investigating what is happening in the community. So, Tex, what are we looking at here with regards to the organizational diversity?
Yeah, so what we're seeing here, again, the group that we're looking at, this is a meta project that we've created within the dashboard called Governance Tooling, but this has to do with everything related to GovTool. GovTool is the community-facing version of how to participate in decentralized governance for the Cardano blockchain. And so what we're seeing here over time is a various number of organizations that are either active or inactive over periods of time. As we move down, we can actually go in and see, hey, who are these organizations? And so if one of these organizations is approaching you saying, hey, I'm developing on GovTool, well, we can go ahead and take a quick look and see, hey, well, what are they actually doing? This highlights it here within the wheel. You also have the option to go and click the plus button here. What that'll do is that'll actually add it up at the top as a filter. I'm giving a little bit of back and forth there because your filters are always going to be important and your date range is always going to be important. So if you ever approach the dashboard and you're not seeing what you thought you might see, or you're concerned that you may not have the full picture, it's best to always go and check the filters and the date as your first primary two checks. And then again, you can always get further into the dashboard as to how you create or modify your visualizations here.
Yeah, it looks like for the GovTools, you already have good diversity of contributions where it's not dominated by one organization. So it's great progress.
I'll highlight something else here because we talked a little bit about it, which is affiliations. You might see here that there's a large group of unknown. And I'll tell you, this will probably be the one thing that as an open source office, open source program office contributor, whether you're coming from the analyst side or even at a higher level, there's always going to be a little bit of a workload here as far as trying to identify who all is working on your project. And until we find a better solution, just know that that's something that you'll work on. But those unknown are just those contributors who haven't yet been classified to an affiliation.
All right. I think this gives a good overview of how GrimoireLab can be used in your project support services. Let's go on to Code for Us models. How to use GrimoireLab here?
For sure. All right. So in Code for Us, again, the goal is that we're developing features or tools that the developers on Cardano and that new developers approaching Cardano, new projects or organizations, the tools that they need to succeed, right? So what we're going to see is when a particular project or repository starts piling up with the work that needs done, we're going to see that the issues are increasing quite a bit. We will likely also see some slow development. So the commits will not be as often because there's just a larger issue that's happening. And that issue again could be multifaceted. So that's why we see this backlog is either many people reporting the same issue, reporting it from different points of view, or reporting that resolving one issue may cause or create another. And so for those of you who work core in the development, you may recognize those types of things that happen quite a bit. What this then leads to is after you start to see these issues pile up and the number of commits are going down, you would probably want to go ahead and check the average committers here. So if your active contributor base starts going down, then you know that there's such an issue with the project that developers are no longer tied to it. Utilizing these features, these metrics, right, from GrimoireLab, we're able to find, hey, this project needs focus, and we need to understand what tools, what fixes are needing to be done. And by funding that here, we're creating that cohesive community of working together. And again, continuing that cycle of the paid open source to say, hey, there is going to be funding for this. We do want everyone to continue. And this will not only create a benefit for the explicit organizations or products that are tied to, let's say, the repository, but it's going to help push this closer to global adoption, increasing those transaction fees, continuing the cycle.
I would be really interested in seeing how that actually looks in the GrimoireLab dashboard. I know we didn't want to look at all of the live demos. Maybe we skip the next ones because this one is super interesting.
I'll tell you, I could live in this dashboard all day. There you are. Okay, so as we talked about here with the backlog, we are still looking at the GovTool project. Now, this is a little bit different or a little more refined. You may notice that we're looking at a project now, more so than just the meta group of governance tooling. So we're playing with these, in some cases, a little bit on what actually gives you the data that you want to see. In this case, we did have to go down to the meta project to actually see what is happening on the core GovTool repository here. And as you'll see, the backlog over time is that there were a few issues, right, throughout 2024 and coming into 2025. A few high points, but that tends to kind of fix itself. As we're seeing here, we've got a real smattering of where we've got a lot of issues that are popping up. And what that's going to tell you right away is, hey, there's issues that are coming up. Something's not working with the project, and we need to find out not only what's in these issues, but what's causing these issues. And this is going to tell us, hey, we need an update to the tooling to say what would resolve these issues is if people are able to work a lot faster with this. So there's quite a bit of manual in this, but the point with the metrics is that you're going to be able to see as these transitions occur, hey, there's more and more issues coming.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, please.
See here on this dashboard that the GovTool project has 282 open issues. And then on the right, where it shows the backlog, this is how those 282 are distributed across time from when they were open. So we see that there are some issues that are getting rather old that are still open, and then all of those new ones that have not been addressed yet either.
Yes, thank you. I really do appreciate the additional insight there. I would say I'm constantly learning with the dashboard here. I'll focus on another key metric from that box, though, and that's going to be the average time open per issue. If you reference this with the accumulated open days, that we have issues that are open for just a long time. And in terms of health, that means that something's not right with as far as the maintainers of what's going on. We need to figure out why is it that they haven't been able to close out some of these older issues. If the average is at 144 days, well, there are some of these aged issues that should really be taken care of and should really be cleaned up. And also, hopefully, we can change that development cycle to where there's more, we want to reduce that average time open so that we're actually responding to these developments, fixes, issue resolution quite a bit faster.
All right, so we said that we were going to look at a few different things for the Code for Us model. One is it looks like the backlog is increasing. Issues are staying open a really long time. But you said that we want to pair this also and see how is the development actually happening to see if the community is, just overall more busy, or if in your hypothesis was development would slow down. We would see number of commits decreasing.
Yeah, and so I believe it's going to be this one here, the contributor growth piece. And as we can see, although it's maybe not as significant, we are starting to see a decrease over time here. And so, again, despite the small nature, there are less and less contributors, and it is starting that downward trend. So this here, where we're still quite active, we have an opportunity to save this project, and we want to get in there to make some changes right away. What we don't want to do is allow this to continue to a point to where it gets hard to get back up to a stage of development where it's working. And that's going to be that key point of relation there.
Yeah. So we see here people are staying actively engaged. Can you take a look at the commits? Because then we have all of the three pieces. We saw the backlog is increasing, issues are staying open really long time, not getting addressed, but people are active, they want to do stuff, they are engaged. But when we look at the commits, what are we seeing here? This is the last 90 days. You just mentioned that maybe you want to look at the last year. How has it been evolving?
Sure. We'll round this out a little bit here. Back to the start of Intersect is what we're going to want to take a look and see. And I don't know if that's exactly helping us.
All right. Well, so we're seeing activity level is good. The number of people who are active is good. There's just something going on with the issues. Still might be a good case for Code for Us engagement to clean up that backlog.
Absolutely. And I would just note here that we can actually see a little bit of a different metric here that's not necessarily clear. And so I'll pull this out. Where we have the commits and how those change month over month, we also see a difference in the authors. And there are some months in which we see the authors going up and commits coming down. So that'll be another way where you're going to take these visualizations side by side and give a comparison. And that might tell you that you have periods where more informed, more experienced developers are more active and are leading the charge here. And so if those contributors specifically, again, you go from one to the next here as far as your dashboards, maybe we need to re-engage those experienced developers and find out, hey, why is it that you're starting to move away from this project? Of course, you'll first start to look at outside factors, but you will be able to pare it down to the actual authors. And again, we can go into detail there and just single them out. We'll see, hey, now we've looked the last year just specifically for you. What's causing you to fall back? Should that be the case? So,
I'll add something that is outside. You can start heading back to the slides. I just want to add something that where a community cleaned up the backlog using insights from GrimoireLab. You can listen to the story of the FreeBSD project on the CHAOSScon podcast. That's episode 103, and it's a fascinating story of going back to these long-standing issues that are open and classifying them, identifying which ones are actually obsolete and can be closed safely, which ones still need to be addressed, and also creating monitoring using GrimoireLab so that the backlog doesn't grow as it had in the past. So there is some really cool things that GrimoireLab can be used for. Check out CHAOSScon episode 103. And then let's get back, Tex. The next tactic, maintain a retainer.
Sure. Maintain a retainer. Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've talked about how we can track and follow a contributor quite well. And going back to the dashboard will give us a lot of the same here. So we'll skip out on that for the moment. But we're able to give checks and balances. So if a maintainer says that they've been doing their job, we can actually go and find out in the data. If it's somebody who says, hey, I want to come in and maintain this project, we can actually go and track. And again, we can go by the meta project, by the reduced project specifically, or even just down to the repo, and we can see how involved they are. Now, you'd have to work with it just a little bit, but you can get a dashboard that's going to show you, different areas of are they contributing to comments on issues? Are they filing issues and they're making commits and they're making pull requests? Are they falling in any one of those few categories there? As much as you wouldn't do this for every single contributor in your ecosystem, you have the ability to do that when it comes into question, or in our cases where we're doing this for somebody who's looking to be elevated to the maintainer category and become eligible for this maintainer retainer program, or even just a developer advocate who says, I have this experience and I want to be able to teach and lead other developers. As we look at the reliability, this is really going to come in key for the maintainer retainer. We can see, have they been consistent, right? This isn't necessarily project specific as much as it is, have they been consistent around the entirety of the code base? Is it clear that they understand multiple different facets and that they are committed to continuously developing? And then again, as it comes down to project needs, we'll get back into the review activity for just the project and say, hey, if we need you on a certain set of repositories or on one repository in particular, how active have you been in this one compared to the rest? So lots of details and data to follow for, again, individual contributors here. For project incubation, there's 5 stages that we have in our project incubation model. And that's going to start from the incubation phase, moving into growth, moving into maturity, which is where we hope that we can get a lot of our projects to stay. If a project is starting to fail, they could move from the maturity phase into decline. They could actually even move directly from growth into decline. And the phase that we hope none of our projects get to is that abandonment, right? And check me on the name. I may not have it exactly correct. The committee's had a number of conversations about what exactly that last item should be. We don't want it to be super, super harsh. But whether that's abandoned or sunset, we're hoping our projects don't get to that level. And with the introduction of the paid open source model, including this project incubation program, we're hoping that the conjunction of the contributor ladder, moving people up to a maintainer, utilizing the project support services, we can keep everyone in that growth and the growth and maturity phases, again, creating a more sustainable ecosystem. I need to tie this back to the metrics here just a little bit. But the main part of the project incubation is going to tell us what are the number of contributions and how many contributors are making those contributions. You have a large number of contributions, but if you only have 4 contributors making that, then we're experiencing a lack in growing that project. And that is specifically a data-driven analysis. Those metrics specifically drive the impact to that organization, to that project. And when we were able to share that with them, that's going to give them just some really big insight that says, hey, either you don't have enough people interested or there's not enough adoption. So let's figure out what's going wrong, whether it's building the community around your project or even just getting your project out to the wider public so they're aware of it.
This is one of those cases you get more of what you measure, and if you want more contributors, if you want organizations involved, then it's good to point GrimoireLab and look at those metrics so that the maintainers, the project members stay focused on, okay, what are the things we need to do to grow those metrics, which is a good kind of gamification here.
Yes. I'll give a last call out here just from the, I was able to attend the Open Source Summit in Vienna last year. And one of the things that I heard quite a bit about was starring the repositories. And I wasn't really sure that was going to be like one of the biggest things that a lot of projects rely upon. But a unique feature of GrimoireLab is that you are able to track that. The average number of stars, forks of the repository, and subscribes. Each of those metrics in and of themselves can tell you a little bit more about the specifics of your project. Is it designed as something to be forked and people develop on their own? Is it designed to just be a reference like the library? Or do people want to subscribe to get regular updates? So you can look at those features in particular as well if you're not wanting to get down so far into the nitty-gritty. I guess the last one here that we have right now, I believe this is the last one, project lifecycle maturity. And so this is what we get from incubation. Go ahead.
I was just going to confirm that, yes, this is the last of our tactics for today.
Wonderful. So again, the goal here with Lifecycle is to provide that structured guidance. So as we were talking about the different phases, incubation, growth, maturity, decline, and I hope it's not still called abandoned, but it's the only term that's coming to my mind. What GrimoireLab allows us to do is, again, track and determine whether or not it's an active code base. And then the contributors within it, although Grimoire will tell you, hey, how many contributors does this project have? We really need to focus in on that timeline and adjust that timeline out and in accordingly. So we can see, when did that project actually experience growth? Did it start to experience decline? Has it remained mature? And then what does that interaction look like, right? So into the comments, if comments increase or decrease, that can tell us if we need to go manually in and look at what is the actual relationship between the maintainers of the project and those who are actually wanting to contribute. If contributors are putting issues out and they're not being heard, or the maintainers are just responding with lackluster responses, again, that gets in the manual side of it, but the GrimoireLab data will actually tell you if that's something that you need to go and look at. So for any project wanting to know where they are in the life cycle, as long as we can look at the right period of history and any and all associated repositories with the project, we can really get into the details and determine what happened, when did it happen, and what do we need to focus on to fix it.
Yeah, and on the next slide, I know you have a set of criteria that really fill in how you think about project maturity. And there's a lot of things that you are looking at, and GrimoireLab is especially helpful on the health assessment side. And we'll skip the in-depth discussion of this. If you are watching this, I hope you can join us at the CHAOSScon, or have joined us if you're watching it afterwards. Shall we move on to one of my most, anticipated parts of this presentation?
I think so. I mean, we've talked a lot about what we're doing from Intersect and the open source office, open source committee side of things. We've introduced that paid open source model, but let's talk about a little bit more of how we got here and how we aim to continue being transparent and really encourage and facilitate the sustainability of development here. And so this has to do with how we're taking the data from GrimoireLab, also combining that with AI and producing a monthly report that gives the actual development information to the wider public. What's most important, what's most popular. So we're providing that transparency, and we'll get into how we actually do this report, which is pretty interesting, if I say so myself. So our monthly report,
the reports that you're creating, I just want to put that out there. If anyone is interested in this, take a look. These are really in-depth analyses where you look at a lot of different data, and putting that report out every month. I think without the automation and the AI part, do you have a sense for how much time you spent on that first report before you automated it?
Gosh, first report was anywhere from 12 to 20 hours. It was quite a bit of manual analysis.
Yeah.
We've now got it down to about 6 hours, but that is because with analysis, you've got to be careful, and you've got to read through what you're putting together. We've gotten very strict with the AI, which we'll go ahead and take a look at. But again, there is still an actual manual analysis part to this here, and that does take some time. So,
yeah. Well, tell us about the report.
Yes, yeah. So as far as the outline here, we have an executive summary, which is a quick blurb to read about, hey, what happened in the last month. As we get into GitHub overview, commonly you might think to go and look at this just on your GitHub, your organization's dashboard, and look into some of the specific analytics of your project. But that can be confusing. There's a lot of places to go and look at. And what the AI helps us to do is just put this in one simple place and tell us what's happened, what's changed, and what do we need to pay attention to. So we take a look at the activity of the various organizations. And again, this can include the group of unknown contributors, but how is the ebb and flow on that? Are they still continuing to stay active with contributing to the development, or are they falling off? Are people moving and changing? So it's a much more granular scale of what we saw in the footprint analysis report. We also look at commits by time zone. Does that shift at all? Does it stay the same? Do we have just one area of the world that's doing a lot of the development, or are we rather decentralized in different parts of the world, are better at doing different parts of development month over month? And again, that can vary project to project as well in the scope that we're looking at. Cardano, again, it is global, so I can tell you that for sure. This will also give you a small blurb on per repository activity. So more than just the projects or the whole of Cardano, which repositories are getting the most action, most activity, or which has the biggest impact of change. We go closer to areas of code, the issues, and the pull requests, and we also take a look at contributors. So there's a number of different sections here, but I will leave the report for you to read on your own, and I hope that you do. We talked a little bit about the process here, so about 6 hours. So there's the first hour or so is purely going to be consumed. Prepping your dashboard takes a little bit more than a few hours, but what you want to do is you want to create a dashboard. Whether you're using Bitergia, whether you're using another viewable option or changeable option for GrimoireLab, you really want to put together exactly the data that you're wanting to report on. What you'll then do, as you can see in the images here briefly, is you want to go and inspect and then grab a copy of the CSV data. What that does is it just pulls the data down from the dashboard, as opposed to you viewing it in an already presented format. You get to pull it down and make your own. You then compile that into a single Excel file here, and you'll combine this with the ChatGPT prompts. Now, running the first report can get a little bit weird. The first report, if you're implementing this, is always going to have to be fully manual, and you're going to have to pick what time period you're going to look at. But once you have, in this case, what we have is a monthly report, you're able to use the previous month's data compared to the current month's data, and then you're able to show a transition here. Again, be prepared to validate the analysis that you're going to get out of this. With ChatGPT, with any of the AIs, with any of the LLMs out there, it's not always going to give you exactly what you're looking for. You can get very much strict with it. However, there's still the opportunity for it to make mistakes. That's always something that you just got to keep in mind. At the end, you'll want to review the analysis just one more time, just to make sure it matches what you're seeing when you go and look at the dashboard. Does that align with what you want the community to know and understand? And then, of course, get your PDF published and out there. I won't dig in too much onto this here. We will have the slides shared. And of course, for anyone at CHAOSScon that attended CHAOSScon, here's this video recording for you to go deeper. If you didn't get a chance to meet with us, again, the slides are available here on this video, so you can go down in deep and see just a little bit more of how we actually build and put this together. Some things that you're probably able to see, we've got a little red stop sign. No, don't do this. This is restricted action. And then we have a green check mark. Hey, this is absolutely what you want to do. And as you would build this particular report generation, what you're going to want to do is write it up first. I highly recommend that. If you get your subscription to the service, write it up and tell the prompt what you want it to do. Then you're going to go in there and train and learn. So the setup on this takes probably a little bit more than 6 hours, but once it's up and running, you can get your report into, out of the dashboard, into the GPT, and then out for public consumption. So questions here? I see you kind of just pensive here.
No, this is great. I really appreciate you sharing all of the hard work that has gone into creating this prompt. And I'm curious to see, as more people are playing with the data and the metrics and AI, what else we will see in the future. So thank you for doing this very innovative work and sharing it with the CHAOSS community.
Well, you bet. We do try to get our reports out by the 15th of the month. We actually have a public dashboard, and I'll circle back to this here in just a little bit, but it's intersectmbo.biterg.io. So you can think of this as intersectmbo.bitergia, but you just got to put a dot there and make that IO as opposed to IA. You can always contact us here also at intersectmbo.org if you have questions or if you need a more in-depth demo. And if you'd like to become part of what's going on in the Cardano blockchain and you'd like to help us continue to craft the developer experience, the sustainability that's provided with the paid open source model, please feel free to become a member of Intersect. Come and join us in the fun work that we're doing. When you get the slides, there's also a link to all of our reports here, and you can go, again, more in depth. But I guess we'll close this out here, Jörg.
Yeah, all good things have to come to an end. This has been very insightful. So let's highlight a few things that we have shared in this presentation. One is we've talked about the distributed and decentralized development that is at the core of blockchain and also of open source. And when you are moving an open source project from being run and developed by one organization to a whole community, there's a lot of careful design and planning that goes into it. And you've shown that with the paid open source model, really, how much work you have put into designing a lot of different tactics to help build out this open source community.
Yeah, I'll just pick right where you left off, which is, going from one organization to many and trying to show that decentralization of development here. What you're going to want to find is what exactly are you looking to see? Now, in this case, we want to see a diversification of the development of the organizations and the contributors that are developing. And so that is our baseline, right? Who's developing? How does that change? And again, in which projects or in which parts of this blockchain are they developing? So that's where we get that baseline. A little bit more into detail, just taking it back to the metric side of things. We actually started our reporting a little over a year ago when we did the month-over-month reports. And we quickly followed that up with our footprint analysis, which is also viewable. And uniquely, we actually got that turned into 2 reports. As we're still newer, right? Again, starting in January 2024, those reports, the data within them is what we're referring to as our baseline. And as you'll see, if you look through all of the monthly reports, not that you have to, but if you do, you'll see how we've kind of grown and evolved to really refine into the core metrics that we talked about, the key metrics that we talked about here today. I won't keep going over reports, but it's there. Do these reports. That's what I can tell you. Get them out there. Keep talking about the ongoing work. How else does your community, how else do your developers know and understand what it is that they've been working on? And again, this is all building into where we're utilizing this data to support our drive for sustainability, right? So to support the open source model. I'll kick this over to you there.
The one example where I've seen the good work that you're doing, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly what are causes and what are results sometimes. It's that you have the data, that you're looking at it, that you're paying attention and focusing, and then you're also communicating, which I love to see the Cardano development updates when you share, again, here's what we are seeing this month. And I think this creates a lot of trust, and which is exemplified when the recent budget was voted on and you asked for a substantial amount from the Treasury to fund all of these tactics, that you got the funding. I don't know if there was much discussion as for some of the other things that were up for funding, because you put in all that work and you've been transparent and you've shown the impact of your work. At least that's my impression from sitting on the sidelines watching what's happening.
I would tell you we've got a very unique format that really aids and supports that the transparency and what brought us to being able to get that budget line across, right? And it comes with everything being backed by other research and other programs. So yeah, it'll be a big part. Please take a look at Intersect OSO to see everything. And yes, taking it specifically back to the reports, they've actually been a really big help because they give us a reason and a purpose for implementing something like the paid open source model. There's a couple of the other takeaways here. I highly encourage any of you to work with a partner. So if you're somebody that's paired with the Linux Foundation, our gracious hosts of the event, if you're somebody that's out there just in general Web3 and you're looking at how do I get started with GrimoireLabs, Bitergia, they're out there. Please go and get some contact. I haven't found maybe a better support team, I don't think, anywhere for any type of support, like for our project support services or any of our other initiatives. Nobody that's as responsive and willing to help all the time. So if you can work with a partner, especially to get you up to speed on things like Grimoire Labs. It's super, super important. And if you're not using GrimoireLab to track the health of your organization, I would have to say that you're missing out. There's quite a few blind spots if you're just going to look at GitHub or even some of those additional tools. That's nothing against them. It's just the massive data that comes with the GrimoireLab tool. There's so many different ways to view it. There's so many different ways to manipulate it as well. Another something I've learned over the last 18 months. It's really something that you want to be involved in. If I can advocate for you to do that. I mentioned I was going to come back to this. I don't want to forget about it. Our dashboard is open. It is public. Anybody can go and look at the development data. I know you're probably going to tell me, Tex, I have no idea what I'm looking at. That's totally okay. Feel free to get in contact with me. I'm happy to go through it with you. But if we're building an open source project, and if we want to facilitate and foster this aspect of transparency, why would you have a closed dashboard? Don't you want your community to have just as much insight as yourselves to see how are they developing, right? You can teach this to your projects to follow their own journey, and maybe it's something that they're able to address and identify before it comes to you having to say, hey, there's an issue with your project, or you're moving from one phase of incubation to the next. So those are definitely the big things. And the last one I talked about affiliations all through this year. So if you find that option, if you're able to get a library that's out there, if you're able to get your contributors to work directly with you, continue to focus on building those relationships so you can have everybody affiliated. You can enhance the truth in your reports there and minimize that unknown category. Did I miss anything here?
On that last one, I want to highlight this is one of the strengths of GrimoireLab and one of the key features that over the years we've built out, because understanding who the people are and the organizations in the project is so important to understand the dynamics and the power that different people bring to the table and how that interacts. There's a lot that goes into this, so it's always worth spending some time to really get to know who the people are and the organizations behind it. Otherwise, yeah, the takeaways, you've summarized a lot of the things we've talked about. I'm sure there's a lot more. Go back, watch it again. Thank you so much for joining us, and until next time.
Yes, we hope that you join us at CHAOSScon. If you haven't been able to make it, we wanted to also make sure that we provide another instance of getting this information, and also for those of you that attended, something that you were able to come back to. Until the next time, yes, thank you, and have a great one, everyone.